As we were mentioning before, Iran has now released those 10 U.S. sailors that they had captive in the Persian Gulf.
Now, earlier today, State Secretary John Kerry praised how quickly the matter was resolved.
Our sailors were safely returned into United States hands this morning. I also want to thank the Iranian authorities for their cooperation and quick response. That is a testament to the critical role that diplomacy plays in keeping our country safe, secure, and strong.
With those 10 sailors being returned so easily, what does this mean for our future relations with Iran? To discuss all the implications, we're joined now by former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz. He's also the senior vice president at the Center for Security Policy. Always a pleasure to have you. Thanks, Fred.
Good to be here.
All right, Fred, first I want to take a look at the captain of one of those boats who was interviewed on Iranian TV, and here is that interview. Let's take a listen.
It was a mistake. That was our fault, and we apologize for our mistake. The Iranian behavior was fantastic while we were here. We thank you very much for your hospitality and your assistance.
Fred, when I saw this earlier today, the first thing I thought of are those videos that ISIS releases just before they cut somebody's head off. Does it appear to you that that was a coerced apology there?
I think so, John. I almost burst out laughing. I saw the video you played earlier. It looks like these sailors were prisoners. I saw them on the ground, on their knees, with their hands behind their head. I mean, that doesn't sound like hospitality to me.
Well, you know, there are some claiming that this is a violation of the Geneva Conventions when you use captives, prisoners of war. I guess these are not technically prisoners of war, but when you use it for propaganda purposes, that's a violation. What do you say about that?
I think that's exactly true, and I thought Iran was our partner for peace. But listen, what's going on here? Is it any coincidence that American sailors were apprehended by the Iranians on the day of the State of the Union and released after the president was done speaking? Of course not. Iran was sending a message that it is in the driver's seat in the Middle East for the rest of this presidency.
So, Fred, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that these men deliberately went into these waters to time it out with the president's State of the Union address.
I think it's likely that Iran apprehended these sailors and held them until after the State of the Union address on purpose to send a message to the president. You want your Iran deal? You want your nuclear deal? That's fine. You're going to let us do whatever we want for the rest of your presidency.
And also, if things were so hunky-dory with the Iranians and the diplomacy was where John Kerry says it is, there are still 4 Americans being held in Iran, including a U.S. Marine, a journalist. You see them right here on the screen, a U.S. pastor.
Five, John.
5.
There's 5 Americans plus 1 green card holder.
Right. You think that they would release them as well if the diplomacy was as going as swimmingly as John Kerry says it is?
That's right. The 4 Americans who you showed, that's right, they're being held. Iran arrested another one in November. They also arrested a permanent U.S. resident, a green card holder, in November. So the situation, our relationship with Iran, is actually getting worse since the nuclear deal was agreed to in July and since Congress voted on it in September.
Yeah, Fred, you actually wrote in the National Review, you said this incident could have some effects on the finalization of that Iran nuclear deal. Now that we have our sailors back, should we delay continuing this deal with Iran?
Oh, I think we should delay continuing the deal for a lot of reasons. Iran has not lived up to the agreement. It's tested ballistic missiles. It hasn't owned up to its nuclear weapons research. But it's pretty clear this administration will let nothing get in the way of Mr. Obama's legacy nuclear agreement with Iran.
So what do you say to people like Secretary Kerry, who says that he believes that these sailors were released because of our improved relations with Iran?
I just wonder what planet Secretary Kerry's living on. Did he not see the video where our sailors were held as prisoners, not as guests, which he seemed to be indicating? Look, Kerry is basically in it for the long term with President Obama. He's going to defend this deal. He's going to get this deal through no matter what the Iranians do.
But Fred, what would you say to people that, you know, this is not the first time Iran has had captured people from other countries and held them for, this is like, I think the least amount of time they've actually held people. They've held them for several weeks, in fact, before.
Years.
Years, even.
The case
Do you think that this makes any difference? Do you think at all? Or it was
Look,
just
it's
political?
great that it's great these soldiers were released so quickly. There were a number of British sailors who were arrested a couple years ago. They were held for several weeks. But I mean, let's be frank, this incident set a pall on the State of the Union address because last night we didn't know whether or when these sailors would be released.
Right. Fred Fleitz, thanks so much for joining us. Pleasure to have you.
Great to be here.
And still to come in today's Newsmax Now headlines, a lesson in vanity. Find out how this man's picture-perfect smile led him straight behind bars. And instead of smiles and applause, Chelsea Clinton's remarks on the campaign trail left many Democrats and even some Republicans shaking their heads. Find out what she said about Bernie Sanders and what this may reveal about her mother's campaign.